I'm Al Savan, GM of North America for Ozone API, also known as Mr. Open Banking, for my podcast of the same name. This video is going to be a fireside chat between myself and Don Cardinal, Managing Director of the Financial Data Exchange, all about what's happening in open banking in the US. The US has taken a unique trajectory towards their open banking regime. They have been largely market-driven to date, but at the end of last year, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau officially reached in and said, you guys need some regulation. We're going to introduce regulated open banking to the US market for the first time. And Don and I are here to talk about just that. Don, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Al, as always.
Wonderful to see you again. Let's jump right in. For those who don't already know, what exactly is the Financial Data Exchange, and how is it trying to bring open banking to North America?
Sure. I mean, FDX traces its roots back probably to 2017, 2018, and some efforts prior to that, even as far back as the old OFX consortium. The idea is the market got together and realized that data sharing, which has been around since the mid-90s, wasn't going anywhere. And the idea was, well, if we're going to live with it, let's modernize it. Let's put it on modern RESTful APIs. Let's have better connectivity and security and common data formats. And it's really taken off. The idea was, if we're going to displace credential-based screen scraping, then we have to account for every piece of data that's being scraped. So we jumped straight past open banking right into open finance. So most jurisdictions, it's simply current accounts, which are checking, saving, credit cards. But in addition, FDX supports auto loans, home loans, investments, pensions, payroll, taxes, and a whole host of other things, including corporate and treasury, simply because that's what our members were. So what is FDX? It's the membership. Over 200 organizations on 4 continents deciding we need this data. Here's a common format. Our job is to be a safe space for them to get together collaboratively within the law to agree on common elements, common formats, common taxonomy of terms even.
And has that effort been successful? How big has FDX gotten today? How many records are being shared?
Good question. Our last member survey, and the survey is going to go public this week. The results, we are at 94 million consumers in North America, and that is unique ID and credential pairs converted over away from credential-based access to FDX. So that's, if I do the math, I think other than India, because it's hard to measure there, that's as big as every other jurisdiction in open finance combined, if I'm not mistaken. And y'all can quibble with me on those numbers.
From 95 million records. 94, excuse me, strictly based on market-driven cooperation and activity.
Yep, absolutely, 100%.
Incredible and really unique in the world, to your point. Something very important happened, though, at the end of last year that is going to change that mix a little bit. On October 19th, 2023, after firing several warning shots, the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau announced their proposed rulemaking for personal financial data rights. What did the rule say, and how would it change what's taken place in the U.S. already?
Well, I mean, it was 299 pages of lovely prose. Effectively, what it did mandate are Reg E, which are deposit accounts, Reg Z, typically credit cards, and then the wallet providers that would host payments to or from those that have to be available via a developer interface, which we all take to mean an API, which the current common best practice globally is REST using JSON objects. So that's effectively what they did mandate. There are a few other things as well as under policy and behaviors and things that are outside the scope of us as a technical organization. We're a standards body. The big message from this is it's no longer optional. It's no longer, well, if you want to do something about scraping, if you wanted to voluntarily get ahead of this, great, go innovate. But there are a lot of folks on the fence going, well, I don't know. What do you think? I'm not sure. I've gotten kind of used to it. And this has basically said, no, you have to migrate it. So there'll be no shared credentials in the hands of third parties, which is important. If you want to get to a passwordless world, you have to first stop using passwords. 2, it also means ubiquity. It means anyone you bank with will be connected via common API, which would be a wonderful thing for new entrants in the space because the data will all be homogeneous. And I think that's going to be really important.
How did the market, most of whom are FTX members already and have been debating this for years and were there for the CFPB warning shots, react when last October they stood up and said, no, we're actually going to pass this rulemaking?
If you look at the responses, and there were hundreds, they were generally positive. They were all the only critical parts were, hey, what did you mean by this? Are you sure you meant that? Is this the right amount of time? It's more of a how to implement, not should we implement. And I think that's the big message from the responses. There are some things I think we could all use clarity, and it's rather difficult from a regulatory standpoint, because you're policy people, to write a policy that can then very easily be translated in the digital world to 1 and 0, very binary. And so I think there'll be some back and forth of, did you mean this? What do we mean by that? But that's the nature of these things.
You wouldn't say that the FTX members or the market in general was resistant to the idea of being regulated?
I'm trying to think through the responses as I remember reading them of the major players, both members and non-members, that were actively holding data in this space. I don't think anyone was saying, hey, don't do this, or this is a bad idea, rather, that were major data holders or data providers in the space, or anywhere in the data chain. It was more a matter of, is this the right time? How do you want to do this? We need some clarity. So I don't know of anyone that was a major player as far as volume in the data chain that said, oh, horrible idea.
To date, the CFPB has not yet declared the FTX API as being the official standard. However, on June 5th of this year, the CFPB released their process for recognizing a standards organization and the parameters for selecting that organization. What has FTX been doing in the interim to meet that criteria?
Well, one, I appreciate your optimism saying it not yet picked. It's their prerogative, and we hope to, should we be selected, we hope to be sufficient and meet all the circular A119, fair, open, balanced, transparent, and all the other requirements they're looking for in a standard. With respect to the requirements they laid out, they were looking for, I think, more additional indicia that it is indeed open, that smaller players and other players in the data space have a voice, that it isn't dominated by any one viewpoint or one set of viewpoints, and that it's sustainable. And so we've taken steps to, I guess, how I would describe the changes in FTX organization. We've taken steps to further codify the things we're already doing. My general counsel's an Eagle Scout, I'm a Boy Scout. We're doing a lot of the right things already, but I think just codifying them, setting down an updated bylaws, and really spelling out practices that we were already doing, I think was the major amount of effort this summer. The CFPB did offer office hours, and we availed ourselves of those. If you've ever done a master's thesis or a dissertation, you go to your dissertation committee and say, what do you think? They come back with some more notes. And so that was good. That was very useful. And so we have indeed formally submitted our application. So we'll see how that pans out.
Let's double click on one of the aspects of those adjustments FTX has been making. A big theme of the CFPB's approach to this has been a level playing field, ensuring that large players do not push smaller players around. Can you speak to some of the specific things FTX has done to ensure that the organization remains fair and balanced?
Sure. I mean, from the things we started from the front, it's always been one member, one vote, best idea wins, leave your market cap at the door. And for 5.5, 6 years, we've adhered to that. And I think a good third of our changes that we've made to the spec have been authored by smaller entities, and that's great. What do they say? Success is mostly showing up. So showing up, having an idea, championing it, and you're winning the day. Now we have introduced, and we will be introducing shortly, smaller councils. And these are dedicated councils, effectively working groups of smaller data providers, to use the regulatory language from the CFPB, effectively banks and those that service them, third parties, again, typically apps and aggregators, and then consumer groups, which you've always had observer council of consumer groups. Think NCRC, Consumer Reports, NCLC, and Future Privacy Forum, those type of groups. So we've already had those. What we're going to do is, one, we have the formal councils, and we will actively be running our changes through them, making sure, hey, has everyone seen this? What are your thoughts? And making sure that their opinions are gathered and we've addressed all their concerns. Two, each council will have, so that smaller FIs, or smaller data providers rather, will have a reserved board seat. These smaller third parties will have a reserved board seat, and the consumer groups will actually have 2 reserved board seats. And of course, any member is free to run for any of the open board seats as well. And so the voting is open to membership as well. We'll be having our first elections, I think, in November. So it really is the big free for all. Let the market decide. And that's the key thing about FDX. The market and the membership have always driven what goes into the spec, what the scope and breadth of it is, where we focus on things. We'll be doing our membership prioritization survey at end of year. What should we be working on? And I think that's really worked. You don't get to 94 million and literally dozens of different types of data voluntarily for free without doing that.
CFPB has been working on their proposed rulemaking for almost a year based on, I think it was 11,000 items of feedback that they received in the end. FDX has been making sure that they meet the criteria set forth in the June process and officially submitted their request to be declared the standard.
A standard. We welcome competition of all kinds, AL.
It is important to note, for those listeners out there, that the CFPB has absolutely left the door open for there to be multiple standards. They have used the plural of standard when talking about this issue. So it is possible that FDX and other standards get selected. What does 2025 look like for the U.S. financial ecosystem?
Well, sure. So should CFPB decide to name us as a standard and as a standard setting body, that would be incredibly useful, I think, for a lot of our members who are on the fence, our smaller members, to decide, okay, yes, we have a standard that the government has recognized. Yes, this is real. Yes, there are compliance dollars we can now spend on this project. So it's all going to be about compliance. Now, to that end, FDX has built a certification stack. The idea being that you can test your implementation and does it indeed adhere, conform to the data formats and structures that FDX has laid out. If it is, you now have indicia of compliance. Hey, CFPB, to use their own words, I now can indicate that I comply or conform to this standard that you've named, and here's my report or certificate that says so. So I think it's going to be a lot of implementation and certification work in 25.
Wonderful, very exciting times for U.S. open banking and the financial data exchange. Don, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.